let's talk to David in North Carolina. The question is, what strategies do you propose for deplatforming bigots? You're on the
Actually,
air.
I wanted to specify this because it's specific to a name you brought up earlier, Mark Robinson, the Lieutenant Governor of North Carolina. I'm a North Carolinian. And we have a problem here with charismatic Christian actors in politics.
Yes.
Robinson, Franklin Graham, these sorts of people. But there's a problem I have, which is it an obligation of associational atheists in the U.S. and also in the U.K. to organize with religious communities to respond to these charismatic Christians? Or is the transatlantic U.S. Christian movement just acting out its most rebarbative tendencies and its transphobia and homophobia and anti-abortion and white supremacy and empire, et cetera, et cetera?
It's an interesting an interesting question is, do you work with moderates of any belief system which is wrong against the extremists, or do you try and tell them that the belief system is bad because of the extremists in the hope of winning them over, or do you just try and oppose the belief system up front? I think this is something that I deal with, all the time when talking about LGBT rights, and it is very difficult, and people have very strong opinions about this that conflict. I guess what I do as a person, kind of naturally rather than out of strategy, is I just try and find out what is right, and then I just try and say it a lot, and I just argue with anyone who says otherwise, and I provide my reasoning, and that's kind of my best hope. But that then can end up contributing to the actual platforming of these bad ideas, or it can give them credibility in an argument. Because I'll take anyone on. If someone makes an utterly ridiculous claim, I'll go and debunk it. But then I'm giving that claim the light of day, and potentially that can make things worse. And I will go and work with the moderates. I'll happily go and talk with moderates on any of these issues if they're religious, or if they're anti-LGBT or anti-feminists or something. And if they want to say to me an example might be someone to say, I disagree that gay people should be allowed to get married, but I want to take a stand against this homophobic person who says, gay people should be banned from being in public at all. And I could say to them, okay, well, thank you for taking a stand on this disgusting issue. And that's a good thing. That is overall a net good thing that you are opposed to this extremism. So let's all call it out together. However, you can then sometimes end up in this situation where you're kind of giving credibility to these moderates, because they'll say, oh, I'm not a real homophobe because I don't think gay people should be banned from the streets. And also, look, I'm standing side by side with Katy, and then there were gay people who agree with me, and so therefore, it's I'm actually just a normal fine person, and you can't criticize me for homophobia. And that is an issue, and that is something I've been suckered into several times before, particularly more about trans rights, where someone, I've been friends with someone and they've been calling out the extremism, but very selectively. They'll call out the most over-the-top extremism, and then they'll also make a big scene about standing with me, and then they can use that as a credibility thing, and that is very difficult. And I think that in the end, sorry, just to finish before, then I'll let you guys comment. But in the end, I think there's so many factors here to consider. I think it differs on the size of your platform and the size of their platform and your relevance in the discussion, as much as how extreme things are and how radicalized the majority of their belief group is. I think I've seen these things change over time, with trans stuff. I think when I had a really small platform, me going out and saying, sort of commending people for calling out extremism and offering a hand and trying to drag them gently over to our side, that was a thing that I could do without any real consequence, because someone would be like, oh, I have a trans friend, but it's a nobody and whatever. But now, with a much bigger platform, people can like use me in a very different way. And I think I've had to readdress how I do this kind of thing. And perhaps, the same is true for like atheism stuff. Perhaps it also depends on the conversation. The conversation in trans rights is very much trans people don't want to discuss. They're all bigots. They don't want to talk to us. They're too violent. They can't hold their own position. And so publicly opposing that is an important thing to do. Whereas I don't necessarily think that's the same as true in the atheist world.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but
yeah, that's okay. I was off on a rant. Go for it.
But we know that people like Robinson, Franklin Graham, we know that they're connected through money to bad transphobic actors abroad in the UK. We can follow the money. Like, this is just like, it's a fact of matter that they're in cahoots. And I appreciate that you're bringing up like the problem of platforms and having a large audience, etc.
Yeah.
But I worry about because I follow your work, Katy. I follow a lot of LGBTQ plus advocates who are involved specifically in analytic philosophy. So people like Krista as well.
Yeah, Krista's great. I was going to say.
my worry is that Twitter, this hall of mirrors that Twitter produces, prevents real solidarity from happening, and that realistically the only way to deal with people with power in politics like Robinson is to create new forms of solidarity. And I just and I don't want to lay the blame on you or anyone on Twitter. I'm actually, if I was to blame anybody, I'd blame outlets like Jacobin that are in it purely for monetary reasons and need the conflict to persist. But if we want to nip things in the bud, I worry that like groups that are historically opposed to one another are going to have to reconceive of what their terms of disagreement are,
Right. Yeah, I do hear you, and I do agree that there's a lot of incentive to create conflict, and that works against the it works against minority groups fighting for rights, and it works against it works in favor of charismatic extremist dickheads, because otherwise they just won't get a say. So I totally agree on that, and also I agree that it's very easy to create conflicts amongst communities, and it weakens their ability to fight. And we're seeing that in the LGBT community all the time. I agree with you. It's a very difficult thing, and I don't know if I fall on I haven't decided what the best thing to do is yet. And
Dave,
I'm listening to what people say.
I have no idea too.
Yeah.
Do you have a take, Johnny?
I have no idea either.
Well, I think that I'm going to not say it behooves. We have to work with lots of different groups to build a consensus, to get a majority out there so that we can change the people who are in office, who are trying to push legislation that is regressive. All right. So you have to. Yeah. I mean, you can do it through you can do it through just having a good solid base of people who exactly I agree with you on every single subject, and you're rock solid, and there's 15 of you, and you sound like a maniac to people who don't agree with you because you have perfect ideology. You're all towing the party line. Or you can have these tentative alliances with different groups who exist out there in the world and go for the low-hanging fruit and always keep on pushing for more. I mentioned earlier, I misspoke because I was looking at the wrong document, but we were talking about, we're going to be covering on the nonprofits, Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson. That's going to be next week on the nonprofits. It's going to be Laura McGee, Gutsick, Gibbon, Nate Smith, and Mateo. But this week, right after this show, we will be talking about in our second segment, this is with myself, Scott Dickey, our special guest, Mateo and Richard Gilliver, this recent report about how top Republicans have been, the quote, here's the title, rubbing shoulders with extremists and secretive right-wing groups. There's been a big leak. And we're going to be talking about that leak, showing the connections between these various groups. It's not individuals, it's billions of dollars. A lot of politicians, a lot of pundits, a lot of power brokers, Koch brother type people. They're all connected to each other. They don't all agree on the same issues. I guarantee you. They want to take the world back to a pre-FDR America, right? A gilded age where, like I said, workers knew their rights, and so did women, and trans people simply did not exist. And so tune into that if you want to hear that discussion, and tune in next week if you want to hear the discussion that we're going to be having about your lieutenant governor. I really apologize that this person's in office, but there it is. This is politics. This is money. This is not just having battles on Twitter, changing the discourse. This is actual factual people going to the polls, giving their money to these people, and allowing these people to have an influence in how our society is run. And this is why we're always talking about this. I don't understand how you can be a secular humanist and vote for these people to be a self-styled conservative. I mean, I get like something having to do with, with free market principles. I get that. But when you're in bed with some of these politicians, right? I'm not going to name them, but they're in bed with extreme, Family Research Council, nasties out there. So get off to
openly opposed to constitutional rights. Like the right to gay marriage is a fact in the United States. And Robinson not only takes the posture of a bigot, but he takes opposition to something that's ensured by his own, metaphysics of law that he espouses as a Republican.
They don't care about that. They don't care about being hypocritical. No. I think this is an advantage that these bigots and people opposed to rights have, is when you are like when your position is I'm opposed to gay rights and also some other stuff, whatever, you can ally up with someone else who is opposed to women's rights and some other stuff, because really you don't have anything, like you're not fighting for some cause. You're just fighting against some cause. And so it's when you realize you share the same strategies, and actually like feminism is your main enemy in both cases, and so then it makes sense for you to ally up with these people, and so they can make these alliances much better than people who are fighting for the liberation and equality of people, because in order to do that you need to know what the best thing to do with these people are, and then people are going to disagree with it, and we end up having we have all these discussions like this, like what's the best thing to do? I don't know, and they'll just be like, we need to just go and spend a load of money on telling people that gay people are bad, and it's so much easier for them to do.
David, thank you for your call. We're gonna have to let you go, but I think my position is form tentative alliances, make your boundaries clearly known, and go after low-hanging fruit. Prioritize what you think is the most important thing. Tentatively prioritize. Be open to the fact that you might say, well, I want to do this thing X, and then I'll do that, and then realize you may have to switch. But I think getting out into the real world, not just in the Twitterverse, but getting out into the real world and getting money involved in it. I know money's a dirty word, but money makes the world go round until, Star Trek world. But
we live in a material reality, folks.
Yes, we're living in a material world, and I am a material girl. So I will let you go, David. You get out there and report back, let us know what you got.